equivocado.
Ahora que el mundo ha cambiado, que los asesinos quieren a la gente. Ahora que están atacando a los niños con bombas más inteligentes. Ahora que corre la sangre en nombre de la paz. Ahora que hay fuego amigo. Ahora que dice la fe que todos los pobres somos enemigos.
Di que no,
La guerra no puede seguir.
di que no,
Los niños no deben morir.
di que no.
Rumbo a la guerra, hermano, juntando nuestras manos, soñemos con el porvenir.
Convenciones y tratados que han echado por el caño del lavabo, comisiones que han buscado pero que no han encontrado, consejos divididos, todo un pueblo amenazado. Estoy frente a la tele, saturado de boletas que se compran y se venden por montones, de la manipulación que con las opiniones, como el hijo de papi que compró las elecciones, de toda esa candanga ya estoy hasta los cojones. Y que no, y ponte en 3 y 2 con toda esa gente que quieren quedar el tanque sacrificando inocentes. Di que no, porque el chamaco tuyo puede ser el que salió en primera plana esta mañana muerto de bala. Di que no,
La guerra no puede seguir.
di que no,
Los niños no deben morir.
di que no,
Rumbo a la guerra, hermano, juntando nuestras manos, soñemos con el porvenir.
di que no, di que no, di que no, 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 no.
So that's a powerful song for me, and it was obviously written, and we see the name Iraq, so it was obviously written at the time of the Iraq War. Cuba was not apparently involved in that, and obviously Cuba hasn't suffered that sort of attack since the early 60s, you know. So one thing that's important is to understand where Cuba came from, that they're creative artists, very well supported in Cuba, and are willing to make political statements. And that is a creative artist, Cuban creative artist, who's making a statement which is very much in solidarity with other countries, because it wasn't, Cuba wasn't under threat. So if we go back to poner en pantalla completa en presentación, I wanted to, or what we decided we wanted to do is explain or give a background to how Cuba got to the stage it's at now, where these things that were important or have been important in solidarity with other countries has been so fundamental. So we saw there Che Fidel. So Cuba, what do we want to say about Cuba? I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. So pre-Columbia was before they were discovered by Christopher Columbus. They existed. Then we had obviously the colonial period, 1492, 1898. Cuba and the Philippines were the last of the Spanish colonies to be lost to the Spanish crown and to become independent. And so there was a lot of independence movements. There were a lot of independence movements active in particularly in South America in the 19th century, mid-19th century onwards, or even early 19th century. But then what happened was that Cuba in 1898, they'd been fighting a war of independence for 30 years. And when they were at the stage where, okay, the Spain, the colonial power was going, like the Cuban independence movement had won the struggle, something happened and you might know about this. I'm going to, we've agreed Aris is going to say a bit about the USS Maine. I don't know if you've heard of the Maine that was blown up in Havana Harbor. ¿Sabes? ¿Tú quieres explicar un poco de 1898 del mayo?
Bueno, Estados Unidos siempre, por tradición, tuvo una tendencia a pensar que
So the US always had a
Latinoamérica
tendency
y el
to,
Caribe
the US had a tendency to think that the Latin America and the Caribbean together
era el patio
was the back garden.
de los,
Was their back
de los
garden.
Estados Unidos. Ellos han desarrollado durante muchos años una frase que dice América para los americanos.
Yeah, so they developed a phrase which was America for the Americans.
Es así que desde la época colonial los Estados Unidos han desarrollado una expansión hacia Latinoamérica.
Yeah, so they developed
Previamente-
expansion movements towards Latin America to have that as part of their territory.
Cuando terminaron la expansión desde la costa este hacia la costa oeste del
When they were through
Atlántico
with
al Pacífico,
with the expansion of the east coast to the west coast,
luego invadieron México
they invaded Mexico,
y a México le arrebataron la mitad.
and then they took half of Mexico away from them. So.
Y Cuba, que fue la última colonia que conservó en el Caribe,
Cuba was the last colony to remain in the Caribbean.
España, estuvo siempre también codiciada por ellos. ¿Qué hicieron durante el siglo XVIII? Fueron invirtiendo y desarrollando
19, ¿no? El siglo XIX.
sobre el siglo XIX, la segunda mitad del 1800, es decir, del 1850 en adelante hubo un aumento de propiedades norteamericanas en la isla de Cuba.
Yeah, so in the second half of the 19th century, Americans were buying property in Cuba and installing businesses as well, particularly in carbon, no? Carbon in Sapa.
Azúcar.
Particularly, yeah, and
Azúcar,
particularly in
tabaco.
sugar, tobacco,
Yeah,
and from which they derived alcohol and
Y café.
coffee and also coal.
Cigars.
Mm.
Cigars,
Sí.
yeah, the tobacco, yeah, making the cigars and they were, yeah.
En aquellos momentos, es decir, en la segunda mitad del siglo XVIII, todavía,
19.
19,
In the second half of the
Todavía-
19th century.
todavía Cuba era una posesión de España.
So Cuba was still a Cuban, was still a
Lanzaron la
property of Spain.
estrategia de no enfrentar una guerra a España para arrebatarle Cuba.
Yeah, so the Americans decided, the US
La
decided.
estrategia fue
sorry.
llamada hipócritamente
Yeah, so the Americans decided that they weren't going to start a war with Spain, to get Cuba, but they did adopt, ¿cómo lo has llamado?
la estrategia la llamaron
Yeah, a
hipócritamente
strategy. And
La-
I was saying, which was hypocritically called
la teoría de la fruta madura.
the theory of the ripe fruit. So if you look up ripe fruit.
¿Qué planteaba esta estrategia? Esperar que los cubanos que estaban en lucha armada desde el año 68 contra España por la liberación de Cuba estuviesen ganando la guerra para intervenir ellos.
Yeah.
Y así sucedió.
So what happened is the Americans decided they'd go for the ripe fruit. So when Cuba, the independence movement was actually about to get rid of the Spanish imperial domination, then they'd step in. Yeah? So,
Entonces, en el año 98, cuando el ejército libertador de Cuba logra avanzar con la guerra desde Oriente, que fue la cuna de la guerra de emancipación, hacia Occidente, en ese año envían en acto de voluntad, de buena vecindad, hipócritamente, hacia Cuba un acorazado,
Okay.
el SS Maine.
Yeah. So when the independence movement is basically they're now in control of the eastern part of Cuba and almost over completely at the west. The U.S. So the Cuban have pretty much won the war and gained their independence, and the U.S. sends the USS Maine to Havana Harbour as an act of protection, allegedly. That's why it says, you know, to actually ensure that Cuba's independence would be safe from further aggression from Spain.
Entonces, ese buque estalló y se incendió en llamas totalmente, estando fondeado en la bahía de La Habana.
Yeah.
Pero en el momento que se ocurre es en hora de la noche, cuando la oficialidad del buque estaba en una recepción que había invitado el gobierno español a la tripulación del buque.
So what happened with the USS Maine was that it exploded in Havana Harbour. This was on the 15th of February, 1898. It exploded. It exploded in the middle of, late in the evening or at night, when pretty much all the officers were at a reception held by the Spanish authorities, and everyone on board the ship, over 200 of them, because all the officer class were not on the ship. There was all the, you know, fuel stokers, and pretty much all of the rest of them were black. The ship exploded. So, sigue diciendo.
Bueno, pues como consecuencia de eso se pierde el buque. El gobierno de Estados Unidos se considera ofendido, le exige al gobierno de España
So the US feels
una
offended.
atención especial sobre el hecho y le pide que nadie intervenga en los restos del buque, que van a mandar una comisión investigadora. Esta comisión investigadora actuó libremente sin la supervisión del gobierno español y concluyó en el informe que el buque había sido saboteado en la bahía de La Habana.
Yeah, so the US are like, our ship's been blown up. We're going to have our own inspectors check it out without the involvement of Spain, and their inspectors reached the conclusion that it had been sabotaged by Spain, of course.
Esta razón fue el respaldo público y político que tuvo Estados Unidos y le declaró la guerra a España. Téngase en cuenta que esto sucede en el mes de febrero de 1998, cuando la guerra había avanzado desde Oriente hasta Occidente, ya toda la isla estaba en guerra. Sí, las tropas de liberación en contra del ejército español habían controlado la mayor parte de la isla, y las plazas principales que aún quedaban por tomar eran La Habana y Santiago de Cuba. En ese momento
So, yeah, I'm just he gets very excited when he starts talking, and I'm like, just so short version. Santiago de Cuba in eastern Cuba and Havana were basically the only two places that were not under the control of the independence movement. So of course then the US came in and but pretty much the whole of the rest of the islands have been taken by the independence movement. Spain was no longer in control, and the US sending a ship there was to apparently support the independence movement was something that was later questionable. Yo creo que ahí lo dejamos.
No,
No,
esto es lo principal.
falta.
En ese momento sitian navalmente la isla, es decir, la rodean de buques de guerra, la isla de Cuba,
¿Quién?
los norteamericanos, pero sin disparar un cañonazo. La única guerra que ellos establecen es el hundimiento de la escuadra del almirante Cervera a la salida del puerto de Santiago.
So the US then surrounds the island because they declare war on Spain. The Spanish-American War. They surround the island. They don't fire anything, except they do sink a ship, a Spanish ship, coming out of Santiago de Cuba.
Entonces, con esto ya España estaba, la isla de Cuba, en manos, lo que le quedaba de la isla de Cuba en manos del gobierno de España, que era La Habana y Santiago de Cuba, estaban indefensas. Entonces le piden al gobierno de Cuba, el gobierno militar español en Cuba, que capitulara para evitar un mayor derramamiento de sangre. Y así, sin una baja, sin un herido, sin un muerto, después de tantos muertos mambises, se logra la paz, pero interviene militarmente.
Okay, so what then happens is when the Spanish colonial powers on the island say, well, we've only got Santiago de Cuba and Havana, and the rest has been taken, and we're surrounded by American ships. Military government, the Spanish government was like, right, okay, just hand it over. But of course, what then happened? Yeah? What's very questionable?
Sí, a eso llegamos con el 1992, 1898, que termina el periodo colonial y entra el periodo.
So that's actually that is all important to understand how Cuba got to be where it is. In terms of the Americans came in as the support for freedom and independence. 60 odd years later, I've read that some military official, the US military official, actually admitted that yes, it was the Americans who blew up their own ship. There's obviously been a lot of speculation about that. I'm not sure. I haven't actually checked to see if there's been an official declaration about it, but you know, it looked like a false flag because it gave an ideal excuse for America, who wanted under the Monroe Doctrine to say, right, this, you know, anyone who is on our backyard, we want them. So they wanted Cuba. The Americans wanted Cuba, and so so between 1898 and 2002, they were developing, you know, what could the independence government look like? But the Americans said, no, we're coming in, and there was a treaty. The Treaty of Paris was on the 12th of December 1898. So the Treaty of Paris was where Guantanamo was given to the Americans and various other places, which and the Monroe Doctrine was the President Monroe of the States who said, right, we're going to adopt this. Europe has got no business to be in the Americas. The Americas are ours. So when you understand that, and understand that, you know, having fought for 30 years for their own independence, to then have that, you know, some sort of false flag event, which then gives the Americans, or they give themselves, the authority to take over the government of your country and impose their own government. We started, for the early 20th century, swinging between more and less revolutionary government, but most of them were in the pockets of the US. They were supported by the US. So I'm going to move forward a bit with that, because then, of course, 1959 was when the revolution actually triumphed, 1st of January. And that's since they've got full national sovereignty. There's a few details of the geography of Cuba. So I'm sure you know it's Havana, but the second city is Santiago de Cuba, which is down in the south-east. And I've put, you know, we've got the size of England and the UK there, just as a point of comparison. And obviously it's an island, so there's a lot of coast. Largest city is Havana in terms of population, biggest city in the Caribbean of the islands. Obviously not bigger than some of the Mexican cities which are on the Caribbean. And approximately 23% of Cubans live in a province which is not their own, which basically means have gone to Havana. So Havana is very much the hub that people migrate to. So in Havana they also had obviously the Spanish colonialization, but for 7 months they had English occupation of Havana as well. And then of course the US occupation after 1898. Obviously there were a lot of slaves. So there's a racial mix in Cuba, and this is important when looking at Cuba and how Cubans view themselves as Cubans, because it's not racial at all. So they define them as blanco, negro, and mestizo, so black, white, and mixed race. But you know, some people might look at us and say, "Well, he's black," and yet against some people in Cuba, he's kind of just dark brown. Some of them are really dark, and you know, you've got the whole range. So quite how you get a census which is appropriate by defining with such three categorizations, kind of a bit of a mystery, because there's been so much. Cuba has had a lot of different ethnic influences. So there's been Chinese, there's been Jewish, there's been obviously the slaves, there's been the indigenous people. There's been a lot of influences and a lot of intermarriage. So you've got
Una cosa que expresa claramente la tabla esta es que en el censo de 1981 la tasa de en color azul de 1961 es más alta.
Okay, so that gives you a bit of a background. What then happened in 1903 when Cuba had got in, you know, the Americans had come in? The Americans imposed something called the Platt Amendment. And this is, sorry, what happened there? This isn't the one that's supposed to be there. Oh no, this is the right, sorry. Yeah, this is the right fruit. So this was 1823. The rules of political gravitation, the theory often referred to as the right fruit theory that I was just talking about. Adams wrote, there are laws of political as well as physical gravitation, and if an apple severed by its native tree cannot choose but to fall to the ground, Cuba, forcibly disjoined from its own unnatural connection with Spain, and incapable of self-support, can gravitate only towards the North American Union, which by the same law of nature cannot cast her off from its bosom. So this North American Union, there was an attitude that Cuba was part of North America, and that's been going on since the, way before the Cuban War of Independence, where there was a lot of bloodshed. So it's kind of important to recognise all of that before you look at, well, where's the solidarity commitment coming from? So, the Platt Amendment, this was something that was imposed by the US. In 1903, it was as it says, approved on May the 22nd, and I think it's important to note that this is what a US site, ourdocuments.gov, so this is the US government is actually talking about their what this is. So approved on May the 22nd, the Platt Amendment was a treaty between the US and Cuba that attempted to protect Cuba's independence from foreign intervention. It permitted extensive US involvement in Cuban international and domestic affairs for the enforcement of Cuban independence. The Cuban View, published on the Cuban site in English, I got this, says, among mechanisms of domination applied by the Yankee government on our country from the first period of military occupation, 1898 to 1902, there stands out undoubtedly the Platt Amendment, clause imposed on the Constitution of 1901 that was giving legal rights to the US to intervene in our territory whenever they considered it suitable, and reaffirmed in the text of the Permanent Treaty of 1903. So you can see what America thought what the States thought they were doing was not what Cuba thought they were doing. Cuba didn't need that, it didn't want that, and it was imposed. So what Fidel Castro has said, and I'm going to let Aris say his words.
Lo peor de la enmienda Platt fue la hipocresía, el engaño, el maquiavelismo y el cinismo.
Yeah, so as you can see, Fidel Castro has said the worst thing about the amendment was the hypocrisy, the deception, the Machiavellian nature of it, and the cynicism. And I actually brought this book along. I've loved reading it. I don't know if you've ever read it, but To Speak the Truth. And all it is speeches from Fidel Castro and Che Guevara to the UN, various fora in the UN over the early 1960s. And they're just saying, we don't want all this corporate nonsense. We recognise that what you're trying to do is get us involved with the banks. It's like, and I have to admit, I was pretty very impressed by the level of understanding of what I've come to realise much later. And so the Platt Amendment was it was imposed. It was imposed, and it was, I can't remember when it was eliminated from the statute books, but not for several decades. So early revolutionary demonstrations. Within 2 years of the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, January '59, there was a well-defined commitment of what was to come. And one of the the appearance of their international activities, the foreign policy. And as it says, revolutionary government started its international solidarity activities immediately, which is where we come to Che Guevara in Gaza. 1959, and that was part of the reason actually the main reason that we're here today, having chosen the 18th of June, because that was when he was in Gaza in 1959. And what is marked about this is that the revolutionary government wasn't even constituted as a government, but they had an objective, they had a commitment, and they had a mandate, if you like. So in January, they had the revolutionary team were already, in charge, and were saying, right, okay, we need to, we're on an international stage. And so within 6 months, Che Guevara was in Gaza. So other aspects of Cuban solidarity were in 1961 in Algeria. And they've exercised solidarity activities with lots of different countries, some of it armed and a lot of it not armed. And what they say, so this is what Fidel Castro has said, is the history of our people's solidarity with the African brothers and the rest of the world is an essential part of foreign policy of the Cuban Revolution, based on principles and ethics that have characterized the actions of our country since 1959, triumph of the revolution. The steps of Cuba in favor of the Third World have an official level, state policy, but also and above all an individual level, i.e. a conviction and vocation in support of people. In Cuba, when talking of internationalism, we are talking about people. And in Cuba, when we say people, we say society. So when Che Guevara went to Gaza in 1959, it wasn't actually part of a regulated or legitimized, if you like, foreign policy. That wasn't actually legitimized until 1975. They had the first Cuban Communist Party conference, which approved the resolution of international policy of the party. And that states, Cuba, aware of its historical objectives, coinciding with those of all peoples, to conduct foreign policy, subordinates their interests to the general interests of the victory of socialism and communism, the national liberation of peoples, the defeat of imperialism, and the elimination of colonialism, neocolonialism, and all forms of exploitation and discrimination of individuals and peoples. So, that was 1975.